Today we will learn about the 9 ways that we categorize or classify organisms. This is also known as taxonomy. So how do we classify all living things on Earth? Every living thing on Earth falls into these categories: domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Anything that's alive or living falls under these categories. So now let me explain. The biggest or broadest category that has all living things is called the domain. The way that I remember domain, there's only 3 domains in all of life. So all living things fall under bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. So all living things fall under BAE. B-A-E. Bacteria, archaea, eukarya. So the first one you might remember, bacteria, only holds bacteria, which are prokaryotic. Pro rhymes with no. Prokaryote have no nucleus. They do have DNA, but they have no nucleus or membrane-bound organelles. They're simple and unicellular. They can be good for our bodies by helping us digest food, but they also can be harmful to our bodies, and they can be killed by antibiotics. That's bacteria. Archaea. Archaea you've never really heard of, and I'm going to take an entire video to teach you about archaea. But archaea in Latin means ancient, and that'll come into play. Those are things that live in really harsh or extreme conditions. And I'll get back to that later. Finally, everything else in life that's not bacteria or archaea falls under the domain eukarya. Eukarya are where all eukaryotes are found. Eu rhymes with do, so eukaryotic organisms do have a true nucleus where their DNA is found. Eukaryotes are usually much more complex and larger and multicellular, meaning multiple cells. After the domain comes the kingdom. So under kingdom, there are only 6 kingdoms. Bacteria's domain has the kingdom Eubacteria. It's kind of easy to remember. That means true bacteria. Archaea has the kingdom Archaea. Again, easier to remember. And then finally, the 4 kingdoms that fall under Eukarya are Animalia, which you can only guess that all animals fall into. Plantae, which all plants fall into. Fungi, which all mushrooms fall into. And fungus, right, of any kind. And then the 4th one is Protista. And we'll get more into Protista in a little while because that's also a very broad kingdom. For this video, I'm going to focus on Animalia and Eukarya. Okay? Once again, domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. How you classify all living organisms on planet Earth. For this video, we're going to focus on the domain called Eukarya, the kingdom called Animalia, and then I'm going to get into the phylums. I'm going to follow the human classification so that you can understand better. But then you're going to, once you have learned the classification, I'm going to have an assignment for you to do. So let's get into it, okay? Okay, so we're going to focus on the domain EUKARYA, where all eukaryotes fall into. EUKARYA is going to include the kingdom Animalia, which we will also focus in on. Usually, when you think of animals, you think of animals that have spinal cords, and that's the phylum Chordata, meaning they have a backbone. If they don't have a spinal cord, then their phylum can include things like porifera. Porifera are like sponges that live in the ocean. Or Cnidaria. Cnidaria has the C that's silent, and that's jellyfish. Or Annelida. Those are worms. Echinodermata are starfish. That's why I drew a little star. Arthropods are all of your insects, as well as your crustaceans, like anything like a crab that has a hard exoskeleton, or like a lobster. Arthropods also include arachnids, or spiders, and all of the other insects. Next is mollusca. Mollusca are snails or slugs. And then finally is nematoda. But again, all of these are the ones that have no spinal cord. If you're looking at all of the animals that have spinal cords, that's called chordata, or having a spinal cord, vertebrae, or a backbone. All the same thing. Those go into a class. So we're getting from least specific or general to most specific. So they fall into classes like Mammalia, which are all mammals, Reptilia, which are all reptiles, Aves, which are all the birds, fish, and amphibians. Amphibians are like frogs and salamanders. So we're going to focus on Mammalia. Orders, there's a bunch of different orders, but humans are of the order called the primates, along with gorillas and chimpanzees. When you get even more specific, we belong to a family called Hominidae. And then the very most specific, which becomes the scientific name, it's the genus and the species. The genus is always capitalized, as in here, and the species is always lowercase, as in here. So anywhere in the world that you're talking about a human, you don't say human because that's in English. So if you go to Mexico, you would say humano, right? If you go to France, you would say a different word. If you go to China, you would say a different word. But in all of the countries, all over the world, human, the scientific name is Homo sapien. So we classify all living organisms in order to be able to have the same or common name for every living thing on Earth around the world that's the same. So if you say dog here in the United States or anywhere that speaks English, they'll understand you. But if you say perro, they might only understand you if they speak Spanish. And if you say something like Canis lupus familiaris, that's the scientific name for dog, and that is understood by scientists all over the world, regardless of what language you speak. So it is in Latin, and these are the levels of classification. Domain is the broadest or most general, then kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. I'm going to teach you a way to remember these in order. A common way is this. It's an acronym, and people say, Dear King Philip came over for good soup. Again, Dear King Philip came over for good soup. It's an acronym for domain, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. Dear King Philip came over for good soup.